Hi, I'm Roberto, historian at Oysters Menorca. On the night of January 2nd, 1929, 37 people aboard a massive French iron vessel were sailing home. None of them knew that within hours the Mediterranean would swallow them forever. This is the story of the Malakoff. The Malakoff was a 7,000-ton cargo ship, registered in Rouen and owned by the Société Auxiliaire des Chargeurs Français. The company had acquired it in 1926 and completely refitted it for routes between France and its tropical colonies, Réunion, Martinique and Guadeloupe in the Caribbean. On board were 35 crew members and 2 female passengers, the wives of the captain and the chief engineer. 2 women who had decided to accompany their husbands on the journey home, a decision that would cost them their lives. The ship had departed from the Belgian port of Antwerp, loaded with cement, steel, construction machinery, porcelain, tiles, and the personal yacht of the company's owner. It had sailed from Madagascar and Réunion in the Indian Ocean, crossed the Suez Canal, made a stop in Algiers, and was now heading home to Marseille. The night of January 2nd to 3rd was pitch black and brutally foggy. Visibility was reduced to almost nothing by the dense winter mist. At times, it had even been snowing. In those conditions, sailing close to the southern coast of Menorca was a fatal mistake.
The officer on duty confused the Tower of Artroux with the lighthouse of Artroux, 2 landmarks separated by 4 miles. Believing they were safely rounding the cape, they held their course. What they found instead was the underwater rock formation known as the Escull de Governador. The Malakoff struck the rock and sank in just 7 minutes, a 105-meter ship, gone in less time than it takes to make a cup of coffee. The speed of the sinking made it impossible to deploy most of the life-saving equipment on board.
All 37 people on board jumped desperately into the 2 lifeboats they managed to launch. One boat capsized but managed to stay afloat. The other disappeared into the darkness and fog, swallowed by the same sea that had just taken their ship. Close perspective from water level, a wooden lifeboat filled with survivors fights through rough waves in the darkness. The boat rises and falls dramatically. People are rowing desperately, some bailing water. The fog is thick around them. In the distance, barely visible through the mist, a faint glow of light. The lighthouse. The survivors are looking toward it, some pointing, mouths open as if screaming for help. The scene is desperate but beautifully lit by the distant lighthouse beam cutting through fog. From the freezing water, they could see the glow of a lighthouse in the distance. They screamed for help. The lighthouse keepers of Phare d'Artroux thought they heard something. They looked out and saw nothing. At the base of the Artroux lighthouse, dramatic scene lit by the powerful lighthouse beam sweeping overhead. 2 lighthouse keepers in period work clothes stand on the rocky shore, having just thrown a rope to the lifeboat visible in the churning water below. They're pulling with all their strength, leaning back against the rope. The survivors in the boat are grabbing the rope, exhausted faces visible in the lighthouse's illumination. Waves crash against the rocks. The scene captures the moment of salvation, barely. Minutes later they looked again. This time, they saw the boat and its exhausted occupants fighting the waves. They threw a rope and, with great difficulty, pulled them to shore. Only 6 made it to the coast near Cape Artroux. 3 more were rescued at sea by the French vessel Ville de Paris. Of the 37 people who had been sailing home to Marseille that night, 20 never made it. The sea never returned their bodies. When the 3 survivors rescued by the Ville de Paris arrived in Marseille, they made a shocking claim. The Artroux lighthouse had been switched off at the moment of impact. The news hit the island of Menorca like a bomb. But the captain of the mail steamer Monte Toro, who had passed through the exact same waters just 1 hour before the disaster, confirmed the lighthouse had been working perfectly. The 6 survivors rescued by the lighthouse keepers also declared they had rowed through the night using the lighthouse beam as their guide. Were the survivors lying to cover up the officer's fatal error? Or was the lighthouse really dark that night? To this day, nobody knows for certain what truly caused the Malakoff to veer off course toward the coast of Menorca. A mystery that history never fully resolved. The Malakoff rests today at 38 meters below the surface off the southern coast of Menorca on a bed of white sand. Deep inside its hull, tiles, solidified cement sacks and steel remain exactly where they were on the night of the disaster. The remains of a voyage that never reached its destination. A forgotten tragedy that the Mediterranean kept in silence for decades. Subscribe to the channel to discover more stories that the Sea of Menorca hides.